morning,
Good
James.
morning, Gene.
Good to see you today. As always, hopefully have a few minutes to have our thoughts and minds exchange. I have some questions for you. Really wanted to bounce some ideas off of you, if you don't
Sure.
mind. Um, I've been thinking this is more of maybe a philosophical question, but nevertheless, it drives what we do, right? We as organizational design consultants, trainers and coaches. Let's just say if you put yourself in the shoes of an organization or the highest most empowered organizational leader, and if you wanted to improve your organization and you wanted to do it relatively fast, or at least you wanted to see results, the fruits that the goodness of your efforts, if you wanted to see them relatively fast, how would you approach this? Would you approach this by trying to expose an entire organization to changes, trying to do many wide, but perhaps maybe not as deep changes, superficial changes, or would you do something like a less adoption experiment by going very deep and narrow as a parallel organization approach and or as very strong protective ring fence structure that allows you to run this adoption? What are your thoughts on this?
So, if one decides to change structure and thereby change culture, definitely doing something deep and narrow where you only do, half a dozen teams to start with and implement a less like structure or something comparable in that is definitely the way to go when you do that organizational change. One of the things though that I've seen is, well, we don't have time, management will think, well, we don't have time to do something as drastic as create a new parallel organization and implement new roles and responsibilities and completely restructure things. We just don't have time to do that. We need to get, improvement quickly. And so, and maybe we have all kinds of quality problems. We don't have continuous integration. We don't have test first development, and we're not we're not building enough of the stuff that the customer actually wants. And the best way in their mind oftentimes to achieve this is, well, let's micro focus our management energies and let's force the system into doing these things. So if we put enough management pressure on the system, then we can, squeeze out these things. And to some extent, that's true. But in large measure, the truth is the system just pushes back. And it doesn't work. And if you want real change, my experience is that you have to change the ecosystem. You have to change the garden in which the plants are growing. And you can't yell at the tomato plant and hope that it's going to grow better because you're yelling at it every day. It doesn't work. But you can change the soil conditions, and all of a sudden, everything grows better. And I find that when I've been in companies where we implement some sort of isolated context, a bubble, a parallel organization, a studio model, whatever you want to call this sort of context, the people that choose to be in there, they wake up and they start putting all of their creative energies into their work in a way they never did before. The quality of the output becomes vastly better. The odds that they're building something that actually is what the customer wants goes way up. It may or may not be as much stuff as they built before, but what they're building will have higher value. And they improve in organizational terms. They improve almost overnight. A month or two is a blink of the eye from an organizational perspective. Now, you'll hear people say that when you first start an adoption, that it's going to get a lot worse before it gets better. And to some extent, that's true in the sense that many problems become transparent that were always there, but they weren't obvious. And now, under the constraints of trying to do this new way, all these problems come to the surface in a way that were never obvious before, even though they were there. And in that way, yes, it does kind of get worse before it gets better. But in another way, my experience is the reality is that the organization stops digging the hole deeper almost immediately, and they almost immediately begin to start to climb out of the hole and make things better. Now, it may take a long time because they've been digging this hole for a decade or two, but things get better almost instantly. And if you do this other approach and we're just going to put pressure on the system, it never actually does anything. Maybe it has some short-term impact, but not for long, and the system will push back. And it'll push back usually pretty hard. Anyway, what are your thoughts, Gene?
Yeah, I think in general, I think the harder you push, the more resistance you shall get, and that's why trying to move a huge boulder off the road, just by applying direct force may not be as easy. Sometimes it's easier to chop it up and kind of remove it in pieces. So that's what you were alluding to. That's probably a deep and narrow approach that we would always consider first. Also, it's a very good experimental approach because it's less risky. It's not free, but it's cheaper in terms of reputation, credibility, and funding. When you do this to like 50, 60 man organization, men and women operation, versus 20,000 people being thrown under the bus and, we're doing an agile transformation. Guess how many millions of dollars will that cost? So I always put a budget and spin on it. So in general, I am very much in agreement with you, and I think your points are very valid. I as we were talking, I just remembered something else. One of the recent discussions with one of my clients, with senior managers, he was asking for advice, for consultation really, how to go about expanding his own organization's agile expertise internally, like where to go, who to ask for, who to look for, and how to engage these people. So I don't know, maybe if you want, I can quickly share now. Yeah.
So I think, something we've talked about in the past some is that to do the kinds of changes that are needed to fix the garden, to make it so that you can grow the kind of plants you want, even though, of course, you're only going to do one requirement area at a time, that 50, 60 people, is you need to get everybody on the same page. And I don't know how to do that. A better way to do that than to, do a certified LeSS practitioner in a private context, or perhaps a certified LeSS for executives, almost the same thing, where you have management in the room, you have some of the senior engineers and the senior testers in the room, and you're able to make sure that people understand the reasons for something like LeSS, and also to understand what it is. So if they decide to say yes, they know what they're saying yes to. By the end of 3 days, they know, am I someone that they actually want to work with? Because this is not a 3-day thing. This will go on for a long time. You've gone on a first date. It also lets me get to know how serious are they about doing real change. And so, although I have not done this in the past, as I believe I should have, I've suffered from some of the problems of not having done so. So I certainly would this is what I've been doing, trying to go forward, so let's set the stage with some training so that we get alignment, so that people understand what they're asking for, they understand the reasons, and then if we choose to move forward, hopefully the adoption will go much smoother because the alignment that we'll need will be there, at least to a greater extent than it would otherwise be. That was it.
Yeah.
Any thoughts or recap you think makes sense?
I'm thinking if I could add anything to what you just said, I think nothing that would be uniquely different, just because the way you frame this is very consistent with my own views. I think whoever takes one extra caveat to this, it is in my experience, if let's just say there are a few senior executives properly positioned organizationally that can do this, potentially they can, but getting proper guidance from someone who is outside of their own organization, who can see from outside in and not feel institutionalized and obligated to make everyone happy and feeling under pressure and scrutiny because he or she are part of the same very organization. This is an important factor. So what comes to mind is this: if senior executives actually want to do this correctly, or at least maximize their chances, they need to know how to balance between building their own internal expertise by minimizing the number of people I engage and not turning into power towers and centers of excellence, and bring in some more experienced executive consultants and practitioners from outside who could help along the way, show, lead by example, not try to expand their business at expense of your organization's year-end budget, and of course help you balance between building internal expertise and also constantly being in touch with external never-ending knowledge flow. And what comes to mind now, the three very important dimensions that organizational executives need to make to see: external versus internal engagements. Don't build internal power towers and centers of excellence just because you have budgets to burn. When you do build internal structures, minimize them and balance also between centralized and decentralized assignment of those people. Maybe have like learning and development structure that spearheads all of the great learning that comes from outside or is built from within, but also decentralize as much as you can to lines of business where products and services are being created and sold, where cash flows through, and those are the very areas that are considered as revenue centers, and they produce cash flow, and they should be funding these changes. And of course, source of funding is crucial here. That's why I would love to see more and more organizational design consultants, coaches, and trainers sitting either within areas that produce revenue or balance appropriately and swiftly between cost centers and revenue centers. Putting a coach within architecture department, that's A, a cost center, B, local optimized structure, will trivialize and ridicule the whole essence of an organizational design consultant.
Thank you, Gene. With that, I think we should close. Again, sure. Thanks for coming, everyone. The Less with Gene and James podcast is available on the Agile Carpentry Spotify channel and the Agile Carpentry and Adaptive Ecosystems YouTube channels. Gene and I also routinely post these videos on our respective LinkedIn profiles. Thanks again for your time, and please subscribe. Thank you.